Thank you for coming, Rick.
Thank you for having me.
So I think, the elephant in the room that everybody's talking about these days is the commercial real estate market. And so maybe you can give a little introduction on your background and how you got into becoming a developer and what you've seen over your multi-decade career in doing so, and ultimately what that leads to the current landscape.
Listen, I got into this business. I started out as a lawyer. My father really pushed me to practice or to study law and then practice law. And so I did that for about 6 to 7 years with a large firm out of New York that maybe some of you who are closer to my age, if there's anybody in here, would remember, which was called Finley Cumble Wagner. And I mention that to put it into context because at the time it was the largest law firm in the United States. It was a great training ground for me because they could have cared less about my personal life. They could have cared less about anything other than doing good legal work and billing the right amount of hours, right? What happened with Finley Cumble is it went bankrupt. It was the largest, and I think continues to be the largest bankruptcy of a law firm in the history of the United States. And a senior partner came in my office and dropped down a paycheck and said, you better run downstairs and get this cashed. I was in the original First Interstate building because it's probably not good tomorrow. And I went home to my new bride and I said, congratulations, you're married to a guy that doesn't have a job. And we went down to the McDonald's down on Santa Monica and Beverly Glen. And it was my wife, Tina, that said, you've always loved real estate. Now's the time to do it. And I started out with a duplex in Westwood. And I was the maintenance man and the gardener. I was the leasing agent on the weekends. I learned a lot about creation of value. And so one of the things that I would say, and I started my business also through going to my father, who had a company called Dollar Rent-A-Car. Now, all of you are in the bond business in some form or fashion. And so this was basically a bond deal. I went to my dad and I said, you make money off of renting cars. He started a company called Dollar Rent-A-Car. But they were large consumers of real estate, of parking lots adjacent to airports, because they were an on-airport provider. I said, would you allow me to go ahead of you, buy the real estate and lease it back? I can take your lease to a bank and get it financed. I didn't have the capital at the time, but I knew with his credit, I pretty much got 100% financing. And there was really no requirement of me to do anything other than put asphalt down, stripes for a parking lot, and lights. And I did about 15 of those deals. And then I went to Hertz with the same program and Budget with the same program. And I built up this real estate company. And then there was a tax provision that came in to aid airports to expand. And basically, and I think the code is still on the IRS books, if you sell under the threat of condemnation to a government agency, you get to reinvest your proceeds tax fee for 3 years. So as airports were expanding, I took advantage of that, and I took the proceeds from those properties as I sold them off to build the Comets at Calabasas, to build the Promenade at Westlake, et cetera, et cetera. The main thing I want to leave you with, I know it's a long answer, is the greatest trait or benefit that I had getting into the real estate business is that I did not know the rules. And so I was able to come into the business with a different point of view of what I thought the consumer wanted in terms of a shopping experience, most of which, frankly, married what I liked. Being outdoors, having a lot of landscaping. My grandfather was a gardener, so landscaping was important as we grew up. And creating a sense of place and experience. And when you take a look at the Grove, that definitely broke all the rules. Mm-hmm. But had I known the rules, I don't think I would have been able to do what I have been able to do.
So when you think about it, not everybody has the privilege of the 100% financing and things that you were pointing out in your story. Talking about the inflationary world we've been in, where interest rates are today. Do you see those being impediments over the longer term to the overall commercial real estate experience? Or is it just a fact of reality and we'll all get used to it, and we were just mired in low cap rates and just low borrowing costs for so long? And again, the business itself will still thrive. It's just a function of the readjustment period.
Listen, I think every period of time, you take chunks of time, there's always economic challenges. When I started my business, you had interest rates were 12, 13, 14, 15%. So you had to build a project that penciled off of very high interest rates. As a young guy, I didn't know they were high because I didn't have context.
Sure.
Persistent inflation is a problem. I think a little bit of inflation is probably good. What we have now is we've got inflation that's causing the Fed not to drop rates, where I think rates need to come back down. But my point of view right now is, with my team, and we've got a pipeline of projects, we're going to build into this rate environment. The rates are going to change, and we build projects. We don't have any outside partners or investors. We're not beholden to go run an IRR. We never run an IRR. I've never run one in my life. And until somebody gives me a crystal ball that can actually work, the IRR doesn't matter to me. We're long-term holders. And so we have a different point of view on that. But I think if inflation continues to stay where it is or not subside to allow the Fed to pull back a bit, particularly in this market downtown, just take it for an example with the office product down here, there's going to be some people that are going to be, unfortunately, in a world of hurt. But that's not the only problem. It's exacerbated by high crime and a homeless population downtown. And all of you, I'm sure, experience it coming to work and going home, that you're not in an environment that, frankly, is pleasant or conducive to a great office environment.
Well, it's interesting you point that out because, talking to clients a lot right now, I like to talk about how horrific downtown LA is for the office experience. And I'm not the commercial real estate expert by any means, but it sure feels to me that it is probably one of the worst markets in the country. And you juxtapose that against the 7-mile direction to where your Grove is, right? And you look at Century City and the lease rates are off the chart. Occupancy is in the 90s. Obviously, crime is a different thing. Do you think it is just the crime problem here? Or is it the nature of LA? I'm always trying to figure it out because I've worked down here for almost 25 years and I've seen like 3 cycles.
Yeah.
Right. And the boom started when Staples came in, crypto now to you new folks, right? Then we had obviously the financial crisis, the housing problems there. We got the live, work, play kind of resurgence. Then we got the pandemic. So here we are again. So is it just the nature of downtown? Is it these, kind of fundamental social problems we have here? Look, you ran for mayor of LA. What is your opinion on all of this?
I think that, downtown, I remember downtown as a young man also just being down here, right? I was a lawyer down here. I worked for Tom Bradley. I was a commission to Tom Bradley. And downtown has a marketing problem. It's had one for a long time. It's got an environment problem. It's had one for a long time. And now it's got a crime and a homeless problem. You have to ask yourself the question, what is the purpose of downtown? Who is your market in downtown? Who are you trying to attract to downtown? So I look at everything from a marketing standpoint and how I'm satisfying my guest. There needs to be more things downtown. And I think for many, many years, not just recently, the leadership of downtown has just faltered. How the hell could we lose SoFi Stadium to Inglewood? How could that happen? If you remember, they wanted to be in downtown.
I always say they should have repurposed Dodger Stadium for it. Simply because we hate the traffic. So at least it'll be 9 times.
But I agree with you, but probably impossible due to ownership. Sure. In a perfect world, baseball comes downtown. Yeah. You have 80-plus games driving business. Yeah. Football goes up there with a big parking lot to tailgate. But the point is, the leadership at the time would not support the football program downtown. Anschutz was trying to bring it downtown.
Right.
We have a convention center downtown that was built when Fred Flintstone was alive. Right? Who the hell wants to bring a convention to that convention hall? You've got hotels that are old and tired. So there's never been this constant leadership in downtown of bringing the best of class here. Now, there used to be years ago, I'm old enough to know and remember every one of these buildings was a corporate headquarters. That was the headquarters to Security Pacific Bank. Arco was the headquarters. B of A was a headquarters. There used to be the Committee of 25. It was all CEOs. When I was a young commissioner working for Tom Bradley and we needed to get something approved in the city, the mayor would always call me and say, Call the 10 CEOs and get them to call the council members. Let's get energy behind this. Where are the corporate headquarters today? There has to be a constant reason to be driving business anywhere. And you got to stay on it. No different at the Grove or my properties. You better focus on it every single day. And somebody needs to focus on downtown. I think it can be great given the right leadership, because I think people would love to see a great downtown LA.
I mean, we had a pretty good resurgence though post the financial crisis, right? When housing melted down, it took a while, but I'd say in like 14, 15, you started to see the resurgence of, again, just the more multifamily housing.
There was,
there was a fair amount,
yep,
and that's definitely dissipated. But I think what's really been problematic is that so much business has just not come back post-pandemic down here, and I think a lot of it is crime. I remember in 21, we were nervous coming to the office because the tenant encampments were outside, right? It wasn't just Skid Row came all the way over, and that's always been our dirty secret is Skid Row, right? It's always there. But I mean, I think the youth wanted to live in downtown. They wanted to be a part of it, and we just never really supported it fully. And I guess it sounds like to me it's a leadership issue. It's not a financial issue.
It is a leadership issue because dollars are going to follow leadership. And nobody's going to put their money into a place where they feel that there's not a good future. Why would you? There's ultimate options, right? Yeah. So Century City is at the top of its game, mostly because it's cleaner and you don't have the same crime problem and you don't have the encampments all around you. Yeah. The formulas are so simple, right? That's what was frustrating being in this city. Don't ever take the answer of we can't figure out how to do this. The solutions are so simple. Clean the streets, make them look nice, do some programming, keep the place safe. Do you know how many officers, the amount of officers that have now left LAPD? Just take a guess in your mind on any given time of day in the city of Los Angeles, the second largest city in the country, how many officers are on the streets? 300. Think about that. So when UCLA is dealing with a protest and there's 100 dedicated there, and USC is dealing with a protest and there's 100 dedicated there, now you got 100 left to protect the city.
Now it makes sense why we were seeing the highway patrol were the ones were actually participating there, right?
Had to call in the highway patrol. Right. We had to call the governor for help.
Yeah.
But my point is that what happens with that, it starts to erode the confidence of an investment or just livability. And you got to change that narrative around. And it can't be done, but you've got to be intentional in doing it.
Well, you're talking about changing the narrative, and I see your projects and the amount of development you've done. And in the commercial real estate world, you know, the last 10 plus years, it was the death of retail. Mm-hmm. You've obviously made it work. Mm-hmm. And looking at the stats on your website, you guys have some of the highest lease rates. I mean, you guys are some of the most profitable on that side. How do you apply that same formula potentially to office? I mean, I'm just trying to pick your brain here. How do we get this resurgence on here and do that? Because most people don't want to touch retail, and you welcome it, right? So give me the Rick Caruso plan to apply those principles to what looks like the death knell in commercial real estate today of office.
God, I wish I had all those answers. You know, I think it's pretty simple stuff. You have to be the guest. You have to be the customer every single day. So if you own a building, you have to put yourself in the position of your tenant, of your guest walking into that building, and how it feels, how it looks, how it smells, how you park it, how you're greeted. All of those things matter. The challenge for anybody owning an office building downtown is your surrounding environment you don't control. So if you look at our formula in real estate, I'm controlling my environment. You come to the Grove, you're in my environment now, and I'm going to do everything I can to make you happy, make you feel safe, to put you in a different place, to hear the music, to smell the flowers. Every one of those things is intentional. The height of the curb and the crown on that street is not by accident. It triggers your brain that you are in a village because your brain sees that little crown on the street and the railroad track. It's all very intentional. let's take a look at cities that have done an exceptional job with great intention. Las Vegas. Constant drivers of business in Las Vegas. Who would have ever thought a decade ago you would have football, baseball, basketball, hockey? It's constant stuff that's driving in business, which is fueling the investment program in Vegas. Look at Miami. Miami benefited from COVID, but it's also benefited from being pro-business and pro-quality of life. And so we need to look at those examples outside of Los Angeles and apply them. And the biggest issue, and I'll shut up, the biggest issue in LA, did you see the front of the LA Times? I know nobody reads the LA Times, and you shouldn't because it's sort of a rag, but it's a joke of a paper, which is too bad. The front of the LA Times today, 60% of the voters of Los Angeles are considering moving out of LA. 60%. And the reason is crime, number one reason, cost of housing. Yeah. This city has been so difficult to develop in, we haven't built housing. There's a consequence to that. Yeah. And especially young people and renters, they can't afford to stay here.
Well, that's what a lot of people look at, and they say, well, look at all these empty buildings here, these empty floors. We have a housing crisis. Why don't we just rezone it and turn it into multifamily?
Right.
Obviously, that's a very cursory view of it.
Cost of conversion is very expensive.
Right. And I mean, I just think about it as like, we look at this floor here, and there's maybe 8 toilets on the floor. How do you support a multifamily environment, right? How do we get kitchens and all these things? You're
retooling everything.
You have to do everything from the bottom up.
And some buildings, I think, are more conducive than others, depending on bay depths and ceiling heights and everything else. I think there's opportunity there. Probably people will do very well. But then you have to ask yourself the question, for the company that's going to come in and convert a building downtown, why are they going to do it down here versus do it in Culver City, do it in Glendale? I mean, our project in Glendale, I don't know if you've been to the Americana brand, that is one of the all-time great business-friendly cities. God bless Glendale. It is you cross the border from Glendale to L.A., you're in two different worlds. And drive down Brand Boulevard, and you will see the difference. Enormous amount of housing that's been built. Very safe city. Very engaged police. Great schools. They've really invested in their city in a smart way.
Let's talk a little bit about how you think about the development and everything, and how it's led to the other parts of your life, too, because I thought Ron gave a great intro there, and talking about the philanthropy, how important it is to you.
Yeah.
When I listen to you talk about this, you talk about the experience. And so, obviously, you're a businessman. You're trying to make money with your ventures. But there's just some pride in giving back. Mm-hmm. And so, is that part of the overall experience? As I'm listening to you talk, it makes me feel like that's what's driving it. But why is philanthropy so important to you? And the causes you pursue?
Okay, so let me just back up, if you don't mind, for a minute.
Please.
So the business I'm in is not building shopping centers or hotels or apartments. The business that we're in, if you ask anybody in our company, is providing joy to people, providing enjoyment in some form or fashion. If you're in the business of doing that because you're fueled by seeing people have a wonderful experience, it gives you permission to do things that you otherwise couldn't do. If I was in the business of building shopping centers, I wouldn't build a trolley that goes nowhere. I build a trolley that goes nowhere at the Grove because we want to bring joy to our guests. And that's one way we do it. So part of that is philanthropy. Me and my wife and my kids, we love bringing joy to people and bringing things to people, sharing things with people they don't otherwise have. A good education, healthcare, a safe home. So the majority of our philanthropy is dedicated to 5 minutes down the street in South LA and Watts, in some of the poorest areas of Los Angeles. And I don't know if many of you have been to the housing tracts that are still here in Los Angeles, Nickerson Gardens, Imperial Gardens. If you haven't, you should drive down there and see them. I would do it during daylight. Some of the highest crime rates in the country. Most of these kids are living in the projects and sleeping on the floor because they worry about bullets coming through the window at night. But we are providing about 300 scholarships. We start them out in third grade. There's a great program we fund called Operation Progress. We team up a student with an officer, LAPD officer. The officer becomes the mentor, and the family lives by the rules. Most of these kids usually only have a mom. The dad is somewhere else. And the return that we get of watching these kids soar, we now have kids in MIT, Harvard, Columbia, Boston College, USC, UCLA. It's remarkable when you give them an opportunity just to go to school and give them a great education. And you go to Verbum Day down in the middle of Watts, we support the Catholic school system because, very frankly, I don't think our dollars would be well used in the public school system down there. But the Catholic school system, Verbum Day High School, 100% graduation rate, 100% go to either a junior or a full college. That's pretty remarkable. The public school down the street, they have about a 20% graduation rate. Same neighborhood, same kids, same families, same challenges. So we love being a part of that. Para Los Niños, right down the street, Skid Row, we support that school. We underwrite it. They start at 6 months. These are working poor families. They are below the poverty line that just want their small slice of the American dream. And this school helps them get there. They drop their kids off in the morning. They get an amazing education. They get their meals. They get everything that they need. The parents are working during the day. Normally 2 or 3 families are living together at or around Skid Row. And we've had incredible success coming out of Para Los Niños. So we love being able to play a small role in their lives to give them an opportunity to go do great things.
So I'm going to disagree with you. I think you calculated IRR. It's just not tangible, right? It's just not a numerical value because just watching you respond to that and telling the story, you can see there is an internal IRR there. You know.
There's no doubt.
Yeah.
There's psychic income beyond calculation.
All right. So I want to transition one more way on this too, which typically I think a lot of people feel has a low IRR. And that was your transition into politics.
Okay.
Why?
Why not? It's a city I love. It's people that I love. I already talked about how much I love people. I served Tom Bradley as a commissioner. I was the head of DWP under Tom Bradley. I served Dick Reardon. I served Jimmy Hahn as the police commissioner. I think public service is one of the greatest jobs you can have. And how lucky could I be not only to be a commissioner, but how lucky would I be to serve the city as mayor and make a difference? And the thing that really hit me when I was the police commissioner, for those of you who were in LA at the time, this was right after the Rodney King incident. It sort of mirrors where we're at today. Crime was spiking. Officers were leaving. The academy was pretty empty. You know, it was a bad cycle. We had a really, really popular chief of police, Bernie Parks, if you remember Bernie Parks. And he looked like he came out of Central Casting. Just wore the uniform beautifully and everything was perfectly polished. Very handsome black gentleman. Couldn't have been a worse chief of police. We were under a federal consent decree. The judge was really running LAPD. Bernie Parks didn't like the judge, wasn't following the rules, blah, blah, blah. And Jim Hunt says, can you come in and turn around? And I turned down the job because I knew politically it was going to be a tough one. Decided to take it. And what did I do? I did the thing that politically was very incorrect. I fired a very popular black chief of police, and I hired a white guy from Boston with an accent. Right? Bill Bratton. And what happened within a year? By putting a new team together, crime dropped to levels not seen since 1950. And so if you want to help underserved communities, make them safer. It's not about the wrong leadership. And what I learned from that is if you're not worried about getting reelected or reappointed, you get to make really good decisions. And elected officials are never compensated for risk, just the opposite, right? They want to de-risk things so they get reelected. But my goal was to get into the mayor's office and make some really good decisions that would elevate the quality of life for everybody in the city, from the poorest to the richest. And I thought that was an exciting opportunity. And I spent a lot of money and a lot of time, and I wouldn't have changed a thing except, the last count. But we had a great experience as a family. Everybody got involved, and we met some of the dearest and most wonderful people in different parts of the city. It was just an incredible experience.
So is there a 2.0 coming?
I don't know. The demographics are such that it's tough. I mean, we thought we had a clear path. We frankly thought we had won after the counting was going on. And even the governor reached out and said, congratulations, you won, and then it flipped at the end. So the question is demographically, can I win? I don't know. We'll see.
What about a higher office?
I've got people talking about governor. Again, it really depends on demographics, and the demographics statewide are much more moderate than the demographics in LA. And here's a good example. And you guys, however you feel politically is your business, and I respect that. You're going to have 3 members of the Socialist Party at the city council now. And that's something you should really think about. And the problem in the city is not everybody's getting out and voting. And the Democratic Socialist Party, DSA, is very, very powerful. They do not believe in cops. They do not believe in prisons. They want major changes in the city that are not healthy for the livability of the city. But they're very smart at getting out the vote. And I think there's going to be at least one more that's going to win this coming November.
I wonder, too, with just the political climate, how many people are just disgruntled at all of it and don't feel that and don't feel that they want to participate.
I get it.
And I'm looking at someone like you that doesn't need to do it and is trying to promote it. How do we get that messaging out better
Good
as
question.
a society? Right?
Listen, it's a good question because I spent a fortune on teams of people on the ground. I mean, what we saw, we won the Latino vote. We won, the Filipino vote. We basically divided the city. If you look at the heat map, I took everything to the west. Karen took everything to the east. I took San Pedro. She took the pocket ahead of that. And it really came down to demographics. But what really happened is the turnout was low. And so I don't know how you motivate people to get out and vote. We need to do it at a state level. We need to do it at a national level. But we certainly need to do it at a city level coming November.
Yeah, I just wonder, given the climate as we come into the nationwide election, and a lot of people don't like the candidates, the choices out there, and that it has ramifications at the local level, right? A lot of people want to come in and support the local side, but they're not excited about any of these candidates we see out there, and thus it does have the opposite of the trickle down, right? That we don't get the leadership.
Somehow everybody's got to, and I think it's word of mouth more than anything. And I think everybody has got to talk to your neighbor, talk to your friends, talk to your fellow families at schools, and get out and say, we just got to vote. What we found also, the Latino community is not a monolith. It breaks down into many different cultures. But in general, the Latino community does not want to vote by mail. And there's a huge education issue that we have to do in a lot of the immigrant communities in Los Angeles. The feeling was, and some, especially those from Mexico, they felt you had to vote for everything on that ballot or the ballot wouldn't count. And so they were overwhelmed by the size of the ballot and they just didn't vote. And as much as we were trying to educate voters along the way, it was just too big of a task. And so there's a lot of dynamics out there, but I think bringing your neighbors and voting together can make a big difference.